Hey, fellow Gothamites, welcome to the Arkham Sessions, brought to you by Comics Alliance. This is the only podcast dedicated to analyzing every episode of Batman the Animated Series
from the psychological perspective.
That's right. As always, I'm Brian Ward, and I am joined by the Doctor to the superheroes, the Doctor to the superheroines, the Doctor to the supervillains, all of the above, and even more, Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
Hello.
Hello there, Andrea. It is a fantastic week for us this week. We are going to talk about one of my all-time favorite episodes, and that is Paul Deeney's Mad Hatter introduction, Mad as a Hatter.
One of my favorites as well.
And I am very interested in hearing everything you have to say about this character. Before we actually get down to the meat of the matter, though, we want to take a minute to thank RationalityUnleashed.net for choosing us as one of their top 10 podcasts of 2014. Basically, they are starting a new yearly event where the Rationality Unleashed project will choose their 10 best podcasts over what they said was a list of over 100 podcasts that they listen to and enjoy on a regular basis, and through careful consideration based on content, educational value, entertainment value, and other factors, they have narrowed it down to 10. We made number 3.
Awesome.
Yes, I'm very happy. I'm very excited. These are our people.
Yes, absolutely. We are among other very well-regarded, evidence-based, rationality-based types of shows. So it's we got a nice message from them saying we're doing an amazing job. Keep doing what we're doing. So it's just it's great validation to get that mention and recognition.
So go visit RationalityUnleashed.net for the other podcasts. Actually, I've listened to several of them since we were informed of this earlier in the week, and I enjoy a number of them. Let's talk about the Mad Hatter a little bit. This was a character that had been around long before Paul Deeney wrote this episode. This was actually one of those characters that was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger back in the early days of Batman. He was actually introduced in 1948, I believe. And this is a guy who, it's interesting, he's sort of modeled after Lewis Carroll's Mad Hatter from the Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass stories. And here's a guy who, in this incarnation of the Mad Hatter, is obsessed with a young girl, of course, named Alice. Now, something that I've noticed about Paul Deeney episodes up to this point, and Andrea, tell me if you have noticed this as well, is that Paul likes to sort of focus on characters who have maybe tragic love loss, whether it's Mr. Freeze and the fact that he can't be with Nora, or in the case of Jervis, it's this young Alice who he's obsessed with, but can't relate with.
Right. Yeah. He and he's even said in some interviews. In fact, I pulled up an interview from Animation Arena in which Paul really describes what he felt was essential to bringing out villains in a way that told a story and brought their humanity. And he said that, of course, a lot of these villains have a gimmick or something core to what makes them a villain. But what he wanted to bring out was some deeper psychological tragedy, sadness, sorrow, something that would better explain why they did what they did.
And I think that the television series is considerably better because of this decision from Paul Deeney and writers like him to actually investigate a lot more depth in these characters that otherwise were fairly one-note, gimmicky type characters. As we've mentioned in the past, most of Batman's rogues gallery were gimmicky characters until writers like Paul got their hands on them. And it's really why we decided to do podcasts like this one. So let's talk about this episode. We actually start out with an extreme close-up of a series of rats that look like they're wearing some sort of device or hats on their head. There's something going on there. And we learn that Dr. Jervis Tetch is playing with these microchips that will allow us to not only engage but utilize various parts of our brain to sort of ramp up their potential.
Perhaps I can make you act a bit more civilized.
We see that that he's laying out these little teacups and little teapots, and clearly wants the rats to be having their own little tea party. They, of course, are rats. They're not engaging, but he then starts to think about it using this band that he's wearing on his own head, and orders them to get in line, and sure enough, the rats begin having their own tea party.
It's adorable.
And then that's when Dr. Marcia Cates introduces Bruce to Jervis. Now, this scene I find interesting because in the past, we've actually seen that Bruce is fairly anti a number of these sort of on the bubble of ethical experiments. I don't necessarily know if Bruce Wayne would be all on board for what is essentially mind control.
I don't know that Bruce understands that he's actually trying to develop neurotechnology to control not just animals' minds, but potentially human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we've seen that in the past, his various scientific arms have shut down projects that are of loose morality, should we say? Mm-hmm. I mean, there is the invisible cloaking kind of material. Was Victor Fries working for Wayne Industries as well? Bruce didn't shut that down. Someone else did, but for some reason I thought it was connected in some way. Regardless, Bruce has shown limitations in how far he's willing to go when it comes to science. And so I find it interesting that he is not only on board with these particular experiments, he actually tells Jervis how much he is appreciated at Wayne Enterprises and how excited he is to see this project in all of that comes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Tetch is a valued member of our research team. I'm sure we can spare him more time.
Jervis is, for lack of a better word, verbally abused by his boss, Marcia Cates.
Yeah.
You got off easy this time, Tetch, but heads could roll if you slip up again.
She is not a particularly nice woman. Talk a little bit about that kind of work environment. Psychologically speaking, I mean, I know we've done sort of management 101 classes, and things like that, but
yeah.
When you're dealing with a work environment where your boss is essentially all roses and buttercups when her boss is around, but behind closed doors, or as that boss walks out of the door, she then turns to Jervis and, is like, you better shape up, you better deliver, you better show us your experiments. What could a guy like that be going through?
Well, it's considered workplace bullying or workplace harassment, which can lead to a lot of different things like depression, anxiety, feeling unsupported and unheard. And, usually what happens in those situations is either people come forward and are told, they should get over it, they need to man up, or it's all part of the business. Or they're told nothing can be done. This is the environment that we work in, and it is what it is. So both of those responses don't really lead to positive outcomes. And in fact, there are many different types of fields where that kind of attitude, toughen up, man up, you won't succeed unless you are of that mentality to, bulldoze people. I've even heard the phrase, unless I'm an asshole, I'm not doing my job. Mm-hmm. Have you heard something like that before?
Oh, yeah.
So we encounter this in different types of careers. And unfortunately, that's kind of the culture that we live in.
Right.
And so for him, again, he's going to develop some, low self-esteem, possibly depression, possibly have thoughts about hurting himself or wanting to do something drastic. So it doesn't really set up a good scenario for him.
She's always like that when the big boss drops by. Cheer up. Mr. Wayne knows what you mean to the company.
Alice, the young girl who Jervis is obsessed with. You can tell very early on that he is quite enamored by her. and for good reason. She is young, she is blonde, she is like everything that animation world wants you to believe. She is Disney princess-esque.
Well, true, but he also tells her that he believes she's the only one who understands him.
Correct.
So there's, sure, there's the physical attraction, but there's something about her that we also see very early on, that she's very nice to him. Mm-hmm. She's very supportive. She's so kind, and he says something along the lines of feeling quite alone, and that she's really the only one in the world who gets him. Mm-hmm. That's really important.
And later on, we even hear her say,
"This is really a surprise, Jervis. You're so quiet at work."
Yeah.
To which he responds,
"Oh, still waters run deep, my dear."
Jervis is really quite withdrawn at work. And one's got to think that part of that isn't just his personality, but is actually Marcia Cates driving him into that corner.
Yeah, and I think it's both. I think, and Paul Deeney has mentioned that he wrote him as someone who is quieter, who is an introvert, who is quite smart, probably genius level intelligence, and who tends to be, he's had the experiences of not having a lot of friends, not having a huge social support. And you're right, being bullied at the workplace would essentially make him feel even more alone and unsupported.
And we find out in this scene, when he says, as you mentioned, that she is the only one who understands him, she unfortunately responds,
"That's just what my boyfriend says."
It's also interesting that he responds,
"Better to withdraw like a gentleman, forget her. Turn my heart to other pursuits." Never!
The kind of guy who sort of knows the right thing to do, but can't talk himself out of feeling a certain way.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Alice has broken up with her boyfriend, Billy.
So you're saying I have a chance?
I'll sweep her off her feet, treat her to a wonderful night on the town, and nothing. Oh, what could a beautiful girl like her ever see in someone like me? How could I impress her?
You're saying I have a chance? Oh, I don't have a chance. Again, he actually waffles. He goes back and forth. This guy has such low self-confidence that even when he sees his potential opening, which, by the way, probably isn't the right time to do it anyway.
No, it's a big no.
Yeah, but he does become determined to actually make her feel better. But he doesn't believe that she could possibly be impressed with someone like him. That is, unless he's using this device that he's been working on.
He knows if he used his mind control microchips on Alice, that she might actually be with him.
Right.
But he also acknowledges to himself, okay, that would be intellectually wrong.
I've already developed a circuitry card powerful enough to control a human brain. It would be so easy to make her forget her boorish beau and love me. But that would reduce her to a soulless shell. Oh no, not my Alice.
So what does he do? He shows up at her apartment.
He shows up at her apartment. She opens the door, and he is dressed like the Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. Big coat, big hat. He's got the 10 and 6 card stuck in his in the hat band. And he simply says, in a very sort of enchanted kind of way,
Gotham can be a wonderland, Alice. Tonight, let me be your guide.
And takes her to Gotham City and kind of tries to show her a little bit of the wonder that can be Gotham. Mm-hmm. Of course, they end up finding the wonder that can be Gotham, and that is two muggers.
Yeah, well, that's what's going to happen if you try to wander the streets.
Yeah, two guys, both wearing headbands, conveniently.
I think they were maybe going to go for a jog and then decided now's a good time for a good old-fashioned mugging.
It's like they're straight out of the Warriors. They've just got these headbands. But they try to mug Jervis and Alice. She, of course, is terrified. Jervis has quite a bit of self-confidence going at this point. And that's because he knows that if he slides these cards into those guys' headbands, thank God they were wearing them, he can control them. And he does. He slides the cards into their headbands and actually tells them,
Why don't you do something useful like, go jump in the river?
Yeah.
we hear across the police band on the radio in the Batmobile that there are two men climbing Gotham Tower as potential suicide.
Yeah.
And Batman goes and tries to stop them and finds that not only are they not interested in being stopped, but they are both incredibly strong, and they just sort of bulldoze right past him. They take him off the ledge, and that's when Batman kicks in his glider and glides them down to safety. I think Batman's kind of got a pretty decent idea who's behind this.
Right.
We then go and find that Tetch is actually using these cards all over Gotham. He's getting meals for free. He's being treated like an absolute king. And Alice is, in fact, impressed.
Well, she's impressed, but she's not attracted to him. And
No.
we get that sense very clearly.
Yes.
So she praises him and says, "You're a man about town." She's clearly surprised by his status and had no idea that, here he is in a fancy restaurant getting these fancy meals and having, the band at the restaurant dedicate songs to him and, folks seem to know him. Now, of course, we know that he's got one of those cards in each of their various hats and headbands and different ways that he's controlling their mind. And I don't think that she's really bothered or creeped out by it until they end up in the park.
It's Gotham Storybook Land theme park. And he does take her into his favorite area there with Alice in Wonderland, which he actually says was his favorite story. And they dance together sort of creepily to the Mock Turtle song.
She, at this point, is showing signs of being a little bit bothered or creeped out or just kind of confused by all this.
Yeah, I would say confused more than anything else. Just kind of like, well, this is such an awkward night. But he drops her off at her house like a gentleman.
And what does she call him?
She says,
You're a terrific friend.
Ouch.
he's been friend-zoned. And then as he walks off, now this is where he starts to get creepy, he says,
Until tomorrow, dear Alice. Tomorrow and every day afterward.
like, to her, this is cute. It's a little awkward, it's a little weird, but it's cute. What is probably less cute is the fact that the next day, Jervis shows up still wearing that same outfit from the night before, as if that's not going to be a little weird for her. But we actually see that as she goes into her apartment, there's Billy. And unfortunately for Jervis, not only is Billy apologizing, not only is he saying that he wants to be with her, we find out that Billy proposed and they are now engaged. Tetch, unfortunately, doesn't know this when he gets into the office. He is very happy. He's carrying roses. He is saying hello to everybody he passes. They all think it's a little weird because he is so quiet at work. They might also think that what he's wearing is a little bizarre. But it doesn't matter to him until he finds out that she is engaged. And then he actually squeezes the roses to the point that the thorns sort of draw blood from him. And she seems concerned about that.
Yeah, well, most women at this point, I would say, our creepy barometer would have been spiking.
Yeah.
Because when he dropped her off the night before and said,
Tomorrow and every day afterward.
I mean, at that point, if I were not interested in this person, I would probably say something to the effect of, well, I said we were friends, so I do hope that we're friends for eternity. Or something along the lines that establishes that this is not a romantic relationship. But it really is, now we're getting more signs and clues that he is romantically interested in her and that he's clearly upset when she's back together with Billy.
Marcia Cates comes in really in a tizzy, saying Bruce Wayne is demanding to see you, and she actually uses the line,
I promise you, Tetch, it's your head if you've gotten my department in any trouble.
she is definitely playing the Queen of Hearts role. Tetch goes to Billy instead and has him call up young Alice, and unfortunately has her like a rubber band. Billy calls her up and breaks up with her again as she's showing off her ring, basically. Yeah. She is constantly wondering where she stands in this relationship. And that's when Alice goes home and finds that Tetch has basically pulled a bed of roses situation.
Now here's where things get super creepy.
Super creepy.
She shows up at her apartment, opens up the door, finds just a hall full of different roses and flowers and bouquets.
She might as well be a floral shop.
And she bends down to, admire one of these bouquets, and Jervis pops out of it and surprises her, and he thinks this is okay and says,
He finds it romantic. I mean, it's really inappropriate. He finds it romantic.
And she's surprised, but again, she's not as creeped out and fearful as most of us would be at this point. For folks following along, at this point, if you didn't see this as stalking, now you can see this as stalking.
It's officially stalking.
This is officially stalking without question.
Let's talk about stalking.
Okay, stalking is the willful, malicious, and repeated following and harassing of another person that threatens his or her safety.
He's not really threatening her yet, per se, but he is certainly crossed some serious lines here.
Well, I said following.
Yes.
So that piece is important.
Yeah.
That you may not be threatening a person's life or threatening to injure someone, but following them, whether it be to their home, to their work, to their car, online, cyber stalking, for instance, would be pursuits like email correspondence, social media, calling, mailing letters, anything that includes constant or repeated following, intrusions, correspondence that is unwanted. That's the definition of stalking. So let's kind of look back at the various aspects of this episode and see the different points at which he'd been doing this. When did we first see signs of stalking for him?
I don't know if it was the first sign of stalking, but he did put the photo of Billy down on its face.
Destruction of property. Damaging or destroying someone else's property is considered one aspect of stalking.
Okay.
What else did we notice?
We also noticed that he seemed to know where she lived. I mean, he just showed up at her house and sort of without warning took her away for a night on the town.
So hanging out, driving to or driving by someone's place of residence or their employment. Now, they work together, so that one doesn't quite count. But yes, going to her place, showing up at her apartment unannounced, potentially even, I would say, persuading her. She willfully went with him, but that was a bit manipulative because it was unexpected.
Absolutely.
Other signs of stalking can include sending unwanted gifts, letters, cards, email, using technology to track where someone's going, to find out where they are at all times, threatening to hurt them, finding out about them by using public records, or other actions, especially other actions that control, track, or frighten someone. So I think the key component for Jervis is not just the home invasion, the intrusion, the unwanted gifts, but that additional piece of trying to control her. That, of course, although more fictional, is probably the most key component of his stalking behavior.
In this particular story, it's fictional, but it's not unlike something that an actual stalker would want to do. They would want to, for lack of a better word, control the person they're following.
Absolutely.
So let's look at her perspective a little bit. What kind of impact does this have on the victim?
It has a huge impact. Victims of stalking can feel anxious, depressed, fearful, uncertain if this person might harm them or potentially even kill them. They're unsure about what the stalker will do next. They feel vulnerable, unsafe, and develop feelings of basically not being able to trust others, which is a huge impact on them.
Even after this particular situation might be resolved,
Right.
or a present situation may be resolved, they have trouble in the future even wondering what might come out of the bushes.
Most stalking victims fear the stalking will never stop. And so there's this sense of hopelessness or helplessness. Because often our reaction, of course, is, you've got to report this, you've got to get help, you've got to get him or her caught. And I think that a lot of their reactions are, there's nothing I can do. I've tried to call the police and, I don't have enough evidence, or I know this person, we work together, so I'm reluctant. I don't know what will happen to me because I report it. Those are all very common, very realistic reactions.
Is there a possibility of someone who has been stalked suffering from something similar to like a PTSD?
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, folks that are stalked, there are studies on stalking victimization, and those studies find that people who are stalked more often than not feel depressed, angry, stressed, have trouble sleeping, have trouble just sort of functioning in their daily lives, and additionally, many of them have flashbacks, disturbing thoughts, disturbing memories, and feelings that are similar to folks with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. If someone has broken into your house or sent you threatening emails or sends you a message on social media that they might find you and hurt you, you, however unrealistic those scenarios may be, you will nevertheless, after those repeated attempts or repeated incidents, you will start to feel uncertain, anxious, scared, and pretty on edge. So that's a natural response.
She starts to get really scared once even Batman shows up at her house, inside the house, kind of in the shadows. Everyone is just letting themselves into...
Everyone's in her apartment.
Allison's apartment.
At that point, she's got Jervis, she's got Batman, the Carpenter and the Walrus show up.
These are his two henchmen dressed in these costumes.
So basically, there's all these intruders, all these male intruders in her house. At that point, she does show signs of being fearful. I mean, that's really frightening.
Yeah.
Even Batman being in her apartment freaks her out a bit. So.
But Batman is fighting off the henchmen, and we find out that with the addition of the mind control element, it also heightens their strength. So Batman is finding it difficult to fight the Carpenter and the Walrus, but does so as he does so many henchmen in other episodes. Once he's taken care of the Walrus and the Carpenter, Batman, of course, continues to pursue Jervis and Alice, and he ends up going back to the Gotham Storybook Land theme park and going through the Alice in Wonderland section of the park, where Jervis actually says,
"You're mighty in Gotham, Batman, but in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter reigns supreme."
This is while Batman is in the middle of a gigantic maze that is shifting its ways in and out and around. And then finally, when they meet at the site of the famous tea party where Alice is stuck there, mindless, soulless, at the table, Batman uses those words and thoughts against Jervis.
"I've waited my whole lonely life for her."
Then all you've waited for is a puppet. A soulless little doll.
So during the struggle, Batman actually uses, this is probably one of my favorite parts, a gigantic decorative, for lack of a better word, statue of the Jabberwocky. It falls down. He uses his batarang. The Jabberwocky falls down, nearly crushing Jervis Tetch, but really trapping him underneath it. And that's when Tetch finds out that by seeing Alice and Billy together, embracing, that Jervis is never going to be with her. He has never got a chance. And he uses the lyrics from the Mock Turtle song.
Would not, could not, would not, could not. Oh, could not join the dance.
I think it's kind of a heartbreaking episode.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, this guy, for all intents and purposes, is a really good sort of sympathetic guy who just can't get beyond this particular girl. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah, well, and Paul Deeney, when he was interviewed about this particular episode, did say that when he was creating this version of the Mad Hatter, he thought about someone who was an ugly guy who lived in this dream world and who fantasized about this pretty coworker. And he said he did base this character on a really tragic story that happened to someone who was brilliant, who was this IT guy, computer designer, and who had a fixation on a woman at work, and ended up going to his workplace and firing, just kind of firing shots at people and essentially losing it. And so, interestingly, Paul said that with the Mad Hatter, he wanted to create someone who is technologically brilliant, but who lives in this dream world and who was ridiculed as a kid, someone who was intended to look geeky, and I think he meant that in the kind of computer kid, computer nerd way.
Sure. In the way that you're not going to get a supermodel.
Yeah.
That is, if you're not Bill Gates now versus Bill Gates in the 70s.
Yeah. And so what Paul was describing is that when the Mad Hatter found a way to control people, suddenly they were able to do his will. And he loved it. He was able to bring his fantasies of this world, of Wonderland, into a reality. But the main reason he did it was that he was in love with this girl and that he didn't want to necessarily use that power to control her. But ultimately, it was the only way that he could get... I mean, this is the sadness of this. The only way that he could get someone to love him was to... make them into a soulless, mind-controlled being.
Well, I want to make that very clear too, because I don't think it's necessarily that the only way he could get a woman to love him would be to control her mind. I think it's his own self-loathing that makes him believe that there's no chance that a woman would fall in love with him unless he were controlling her mind.
Yes, precisely. It's his own perception. I didn't make that as clear. It's his perception that he is so unworthy and he's been so unloved that the only way that he imagines that someone would be with him is to control their mind. Is that what you mean? That
Absolutely.
It's not the reality of it.
Correct.
But he does live in this sort of imaginal fantasy where, if he were the Mad Hatter, he would be purposeful and attractive and be the life of the party, be the host of the party, if you will. So he has all this influence and power and people adore him and he's embodying this character, this king of Wonderland. And so someone wrapped up in that fantasy wouldn't necessarily understand that with appropriate, healthy, social interactions and appropriate and healthy advancements or, romantic type of pursuits, if you will, that he could potentially find someone that would love him for him. But he's not in that world. He's in this fantasy where he has to kind of create this world for himself.
He's mad as a hatter.
So where did that phrase come from? The mad as a hatter?
Hatters would use mercury to stabilize wool, which is a process called felting.
Okay.
So when you have a felted hat, you've got these hatters who are using this toxic chemical where the vapors are just constantly being inhaled and skin is coming in contact with this mercury, and it's actually poisoning them. And as a result, it was very common for a hatter and a clockmaker, for that matter, to go mad. They would start to get tremors. They would start to get severe mood swings. They would exhibit a great deal of irritability or shyness, very low self-confidence, depression. In fact, much of what we're seeing Jervis go through in this episode, where he'll bounce from one emotion to another, usually swinging downward toward depression and suicidal tendencies and even delirium. Like, these were all the symptoms that Hatters would get. And so when you see Lewis Carroll's Hatter from Alice in Wonderland and he is mad as a Hatter, presumably it's because he is a hat maker.
Interesting. So we don't know for sure that he worked with mercury or any kind of toxic substance, but
he's in a lab, so it's very possible.
And he's using something as adhesive for those little tiny hats on those mice. So I don't know.
Got little straps on, I think. That and
he's using a lot of headbands. Okay.
there are a lot of headbands. And the card that he designs based off of Alice in Wonderland's Mad Hatter, the 10 and 6 design there on the card. He's clearly mad as a Hatter.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's possible that he is the reason that he's delusional is because of some kind of substance. Although it is also possible that he happens to be someone with some psychotic symptoms like the ones he has, these false beliefs that he is this character, or this type of obsession over somebody where, most of us would see this and tell ourselves, now this person doesn't love you, isn't in love with you, you should stop pursuing them. But he has this delusional kind of presentation where he truly believes that if he continues to pursue her, in addition with his microchips, that he's able to be in a relationship with her. And that is a very delusional type of presentation.
So how would you treat someone who is delusional like this?
First, I would want to establish safety. What that means is that I would need to ensure that Alice is no longer in a place where she's threatened, where she's pursued. She needs to, we need to ensure that she's safe. At the same time, when we're, working with someone who's more apt to be a stalker, there are some predictors of violence. So we need to ensure safety on his end too. So that would be things like, using substances, alcohol, drugs, having a history of violence, having possession of weapons or some way in which he could continue to cause harm to people, continuing to threaten others, having those feelings or ideas of disregard for other people. So I would kind of do an assessment of, does he still have access to these mind control contraptions and technology? Does he have any additional weapons or something that he could threaten other people's lives with? Does he have any thoughts or feelings of wanting to harm or hurt other people? And then finally, when it comes to safety, we also want to think about suicide and self-harm. Does he have any thoughts about harming himself or wanting to end his own life, especially now that Alice is with Billy and she's essentially rejected him?
Right.
Is his life so destroyed at this point that he's considering suicide? So establishing safety on all accounts is one of the most important first steps. Now, as far as some kind of psychiatric or psychological intervention, we would need to establish kind of the level of psychoticism that he's presenting with. So what kind of insight? It's kind of an evaluation about his insight. Does he truly believe he's the Mad Hatter? Does he truly believe he's this fictional character in this fantasy world? Or is it more of an escapism and he feels comfortable and more himself and more confident when he's trying to embody a different person? Similarly, does he truly believe that he can make someone love him or does he have continued thoughts about pursuing Alice and believing that she will fall in love with him or believing that they're meant to be together, even though now we know that all signs point to no? His level of insight is really important in understanding if some more what I would call more serious intervention like antipsychotic medication and hospitalization are indicated. And if not, if he has a level of insight that tells me that something like psychotherapy would be helpful, then we would have some reality testing in some supportive talk therapy. So talking briefly about the origins of these fantasies that he has, talking about why he feels more fulfilled and maybe more likable when he's a different person and not Jervis Tetch. And then some additional reality testing on, if you have thoughts that no one else will love you or that you're all alone or no one understands you, how do we find evidence that that's not true? Who in your life does love you? Who is, what friends, family, coworkers are supportive other than Alice that would show you that you have a meaningful and fulfilled life without pursuing this one person? So there is some hope for him, of course, depending on some of these interventions and depending on exactly what level of insight he has.
Sounds pretty in-depth. And maybe even sort of a long-term thing.
Yeah, there would be lots of tea parties.
Well, it's a good thing we're going to have another session or two with the Mad Hatter before the series ends. Like I said, I love this episode. Paul Deeney created such a strong character with this. I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes from here, and it can really only get better.
I agree.
So let's talk about next week. Next week, we will, in fact, have an episode. However, it will appear on Comics Alliance on Tuesday, and it'll appear on iTunes and all the other places where you get podcasts on Thursday. So we should actually bring up our schedules for next week at San Diego Comic-Con International right now. Andrea, you have got like a bazillion panels that you're going to be on.
This is not true. There are 5 panels.
I'm pretty sure I saw the schedule and you're on every panel.
That is not true.
At Comic-Con.
Not true, but I can talk about some of the panels that I will be speaking on and give some information about that. On Friday night, I'm a panelist on the science of science fiction. This will be Friday at 6 p.m. in room 7AB. This panel is essentially featuring a number of different professionals, scientists, and other folks in the industry of film and television. And we'll talk about the essentially what kind of the presentation that Hollywood gives about science, including psychological science, and the level of veracity or truthiness, if you will, that's actually presented in those versions of science. So
cool.
That's a cool one to check out. The next day, Saturday at 8:30 p.m. is the Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars. This may be a familiar one to you because you are moderating this panel.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so go to room 26AB Saturday night so you can moderate this panel, Brian.
I suppose I will. That's at 8:30.
It's at 8:30.
Saturday night.
Well, it's Comic-Con after hours.
It is very Comic-Con after hours. Guys, seriously, we are up against a lot of stuff. Saturday night, you got a lot of parties. You got a lot of, you got Masquerade. You got screenings. I think Kevin Smith might be that night or something. If you don't have tickets to that, don't even bother now. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of stuff going on Saturday night. And I gotta tell you, Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars is going to be awesome. We've got special guests. I mean, it's you and it's Dr. Ali Matu, as always, the two psychologists. You are representing Team Star Wars.
As always.
He is representing Team Star Trek.
Boo!
And then, of course, in our every time we do this, we have new panelists, guest panelists. This year, who do we have?
We have Sam Witwer from the Clone Wars. He, of course, is known for voicing Darth Maul. And he, of course, is on the Star Wars side. And then Rod Roddenberry will be the guest on the Star Trek side, battling it out in defense of the other franchise.
It's a great panel. You guys should definitely check it out. We say versus and we say battling it out, but really there's a lot of love for both franchises here. And
that's true.
And it's always a really good time and always very well received. So definitely come check us out Saturday night, 8:30, In what room was it again?
In room 26AB.
Okay. So what else have you got?
Now, Sunday is more of an educational day. Not that what I do normally isn't educational, but I've got a number of panels on Sunday that should be quite gripping and interesting. The first one is Superheroines, Power, Responsibility, and Representation. That is Sunday afternoon at 1:30 in room 23 ABC. It's actually hosted by racebending.com. It represents an intersectional all-women Justice League of graphic novelists, artists, and cultural commentators to explore the topic of women in the superhero world. So featured panelists include Marjorie Liu, Margaret Bennett, Faith Aaron Hicks, myself, Joanna Estep, and Jules Rivera. I'm actually really excited to be on the anti-bullying panel this year. That panel is called End Bullying, Responding to Cruelty in Our Culture. And that's Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock in room 24 ABC. This is one that I really encourage people to go to, either if they have been a target of bullying or if they know someone who has been bullied. My friends Chase Masterson and Carrie Goldman run this panel along with representatives from the United Nations Association and Anti-Defamation League.
Wow.
So topics include things like geek bullying, LGBT bullying, cyberbullying, and analyzing how media and entertainment affect attitudes toward bullying and aggression. So it's really one not to miss.
And then your last one?
Finally, the Battle for Multicultural Heroes is Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock in room 28DE. I'm super excited to be involved in this panel. Of course, it's about cultural diversity.
And I saw this one at WonderCon. It is a fantastic panel.
Yeah, we try to talk about the lack of cultural diversity and how to celebrate various groups in the comic book genres. So
I don't know that I will be able to be there for that one because I have my own booth, my company's booth there at Shout Factories, always at Comic-Con. So I need you to do me a favor. And this time, you need to bring up redheads as a cultural minority.
I will.
We need better representation.
Especially
it's not always about skin color.
Especially in Batman, the animated series, where redheads are treated so poorly.
So poorly. And where would they be able to see that one?
That one is in room 28DE.
And that's at what time again?
That is at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock on Sunday. And then I also have my own panel.
That isn't allowed.
That you aren't even a part of.
That's unfair.
I will be giving you an inside look at Shout Factory, Shout Kids, and Scream Factory, along with Melissa Bogue, our Vice President of Kids Marketing, and Jeff Nelson, who is the guru behind Scream Factory. We will have all kinds of special sort of insidery Shout Factory stories and tips. But most importantly, for a lot of you folks, we're going to have announcements. Big announcements coming up. You are definitely going to want to come to that one, especially if you've been fans of any of my projects in the past. You very well may want to attend this panel because you're going to learn some cool stuff coming up. So that one is Friday night at 7 o'clock in room 23 ABC. So after you go to Drea's 6 o'clock panel on Friday night, you should then go right over to 23 ABC and check out an inside look at Shout Factory, Shout Kids, and Scream Factory.
Cool.
That's Comic-Con, and this is our show. Thanks for joining us, guys. We look forward to checking out our episode next week. Until then, you can definitely check us out on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. I am at bward028.
I am at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can also email us. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come like us on Facebook. You can also check out Drea's website, underthemaskonline.com, where you can also reach out and email her there.
Yeah, and the full Comic-Con schedule is actually on underthemaskonline.com.
So if you need any updates on how to find us at Comic-Con, go check out underthemaskonline.com, and you'll be able to find Drea. And until next week, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.